There, it's Lara here with another Witchy Wednesday weekly astrology forecast, this time for the week of May 22nd to 28th, 2019. Welcome. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time to the channel, I'm really happy you're here and I hope you stick around. I hope you subscribe and you can hit the little notification bell and that way you'll always know when these videos come out. So how about that full moon in Scorpio that we had? It was pretty powerful. And personally, I've found, and it may be because my natal moon's in Scorpio, but there was a lingering effect. There was a big, powerful, emotional, intense lead up. And then the impact kind of lingered, or the feelings sort of lingered, but they became a little less intense, I guess. And there was a bit of a shift that happened over the course of the full moon. I'm not sure how you experienced it, but feel free to let me know in the comments below or in some other way. You can always connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, email me, whatever, reach out at my website. The link to that is always below, to all of that is below. And you can reach me in any of those ways. And if you want to, if you want information about personal readings, then the place to do that is at my website. And then you can reach out with any questions too. So right now we have the moon in Capricorn as of yesterday, Tuesday, right? And the moon is hanging out right near the south node, and also will pass over the Saturn-Pluto situation there in Capricorn. And it's going to pass over the eclipse point. So the lunar eclipse in July is happening July 16th. And there's a solar eclipse before that. But the lunar eclipse is in Capricorn at 24 degrees Capricorn. And so we're kind of getting this precursor, or a bit of a flavor, or a hint potentially, over these next few days about what may be triggered around the time of the eclipse, what may, sort of come to pass or be the focus for us around the time of the eclipse in July. And like I said, there's a solar eclipse before that on July 6th. That is in the sign of Cancer, opposite to Capricorn, right? But right now the moon is in Capricorn and it is shifting into Aquarius later tomorrow, sometime tomorrow, and Pisces on Sunday, and then Aries on Tuesday. It depends exactly what time, because it depends where you live. It depends on your time zone, right? But you can look that up if you're interested in knowing more about the moon and where she's at. If you just Google that, you'll find all kinds of info. So what we're going to talk about mostly today is Gemini stuff, Gemini season, because there's a lot going on in Gemini. A couple of other things we're going to touch on that are relevant to this week's astrology. But as of yesterday, the sun moved into Gemini. So happy birthday, Gemini sun signs. I know quite a few. I have a few in my life. And Mercury is also now in Gemini, which is its home sign. And this is a very powerful place for Mercury because Mercury likes being at home, right? The planets like being in their home signs. Along with that, we've got, the sun and Mercury are in conjunction right now. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but meaning right close together. We have Mars in Cancer until July 1st. So for the next, 4 or 5 weeks, Mars is going to be in Cancer. And I want to talk just a smidge about this because it's relevant to this week, because it's making some conversations. And most notably, it's going to sextile Uranus in Taurus today. That's happening on the 22nd. And it's squaring Chiron over these next few days. But just in generally speaking, Mars in Cancer takes things personally. It has that tendency. So it can trigger some of our kind of core wounds, our core emotional wounds and insecurities, right? And it can lash out. It's that cardinal energy. And Cancer is a cardinal sign, right? One of the cardinal signs. And our sort of strong feelings can lead to impulsive reactions based on our emotions. And if you're triggered, you may, go into defense mode, like the crab, right? Protecting yourself, protecting your close, your family, your tribe, that kind of thing, the people close to you. So I actually have a brief story to share with you that you may or may not already know. If you're on Facebook, you may have seen it. But this is a perfect example of what can happen on this sort of shadow side of Mars being in Cancer, and also this Mars squaring Chiron that's brewing right around now. So with Mars in Cancer, right, I talked about the emotional triggers and the impulsivity, sort of lashing out, that kind of thing. And what happened to me early yesterday morning, I guess it probably kind of happened overnight, but was I encountered my first serious hater, internet hater. Somebody that I had interactions with before that were quite pleasant, and somebody who had been, a supporter, that I even had been a client at one point. Nobody I know personally, but and all was well. And suddenly, something that I posted on Facebook triggered this person, and so there was a major lashing out, right? I became the target for this individual's kind of whatever that person's going through, their pain, right? Their pain body was triggered, and I was on the receiving end. And to make a long story short, it was pretty nasty. There were some personal messages sent and this kind of thing. And so I thankfully didn't counteract that with the same kind of reaction. There have been points in my life in the past when I probably would have, truthfully. But I've done a lot of work, on that, and I have the awareness of what's going on with the astrology as well, so that's helpful. And I recognize this as really not about me. And so, I bid the person well and just kind of cut them off. So that happened to me. I don't know if you've got any interesting stories to relate about those kinds of things, but do tell. Don't get personal. Nobody needs to mention names or anything like that. That's totally unnecessary. But I'm relating this story simply as kind of an anecdote that supports what I'm talking about with Mars in Cancer, and Mars in Cancer in a brewing square to Chiron. I'd call it a square at this point because I think they're within 1 degree. They're just not exact. So, these things kind of, as you've heard me say before, when aspects occur, we feel the effects, the impact. We tend to feel them as a bit of a ripple out either side of when the aspect is exact, particularly if you're kind of sensitive in that way. But Mars squaring Chiron, right? So think of Mars as is a very active planet. It's a masculine, young energy. It is driven and ambitious and forward, moving kind of thing. It goes out and gets what it wants rather than being receptive. And so Chiron is, you've heard me mention before, or if you've studied astrology at all, you may know that Chiron is known most often as the wounded healer in astrology, or the rainbow bridge. Some people, refer to Chiron as that as well. And there's varying things that Chiron is associated with, but most notably associated with wounding, meaning our deepest spiritual wounding, right? Those areas in our life that have caused us some grief, some anguish, some pain, that kind of thing. And we may have some difficulty completely getting over it. In fact, right, it's like a place where you're wounded, a scar may grow over, so there's always this reminder of the wound being there, even if the wound has healed. So it's that kind of vibe. And I've mentioned before, I've got 2 separate videos on Chiron, very specifically on my website. I think the file is called, special astrology videos, I think. So you can check those out if you want. But here, the whole combination of Chiron squaring, right? Squaring is this energy of tension where something's got to give, right? A direction has to be taken. There's kind of this fork in the road, or this friction going on here. And with these 2 planets, this is about sort of poking at our wounds. And there can be a level of internal tension. It can make some folks, quite passive aggressive, because we get in this mode of like victim thinking and ruminating, or perhaps on, regretting the past and woulda, coulda, shoulda, these kinds of things. And we have some difficulty expressing our anger under this influence. We hold it in, right? And so when people are holding their anger in, but they're still angry, it makes them passive aggressive. And so this can happen. This can be, us fearing our own anger and unleashing it in an unhinged kind of fashion when our wounds are exposed or triggered, projecting our unexpressed anger and wounding, our unacknowledged anger onto, or unacknowledged wounding really onto others. And, but on the positive end, this can make us quite self-reliant if we are conscious and aware of this energy in particular. And the tension that's occurring between Chiron and Mars, it's happening, right? Chiron is in Aries and Mars is currently in Cancer. So the tension that's happening is between the energy of Aries, so I, myself, my individuality, my desires, my instincts, and my sort of sovereignty and will. And then Cancer, our home, our family, our place of living, even our close tribe, those we consider family, perhaps the mother or mother figure, and also our sense of emotional security. It's this notion of I am, Aries, versus I feel, right? So, which is Cancer. So these 2 things are kind of squaring off over the next few days, and we may experience that internally or from an external source. So there's that. And getting back now to more things Mercury and Gemini, because Mercury rules Gemini, and Mercury is, as I mentioned, in Gemini. So Mercury is now what we call combust. So very close to the sun, but it has passed its Cazimi point, which is it's less than 1 degree, away from the heart of the sun. So it's in the heart of the sun when it's Cazimi. That was officially yesterday. And this really, it's like a power surge of Mercury energy. And now it is really still close to the sun, and will move, farther away, but will still be influenced, right, by this conjunction. And this combination of energies is powerful. So this can give us some clarity, particularly initially, like when this Cazimi, when Mercury is right in the heart of the sun happens, some clarity, some problem solving, particularly in the Gemini area of our chart. We may have some kind of sort of flash of clarity, or see see the heart of the matter, right? Realize, become aware of the heart of the matter. But then once Mercury starts moving on, there can be a bit of a time where things are a little bit confusing, in the sense that we're overthinking things. We are, there may be too much information coming in, too much information being shared, too much communication, overwhelm, frantic thinking, racing mind. These kinds of things may happen for a few days, but ultimately, Mercury and its home sign, along with the Sun, is a really good combination. So these two energies are concentrated. So think about it this way: the Sun is sort of the boss, right? And Mercury is the administrative assistant, who is really very key to the operation of things, to keeping things operating smoothly and efficiently. It's supporting the energies of the Sun. And so Mercury rules communications. It's the messenger god, right? Mercury was the messenger god. And he was able, actually, I shouldn't say he, because Mercury is a neutral energy, not gender specific. And Mercury could travel between the worlds, bringing messages back and forth. And so hence the association with communication, with information, intellectual stimulation, thoughts, ideas, travel, socialization, choices, these kinds of things, right? And this energy will be felt most strongly by the air signs. Specifically, if you've got some planets or points at the early degrees of Gemini, and if you've got your Sun at the very sort of 0 to 1 degree of Gemini, this should be a year for you where there is some clarity, or clarity seeking that happens. And what I'll say is that if you kind of get caught up in the overthinking mode, too much stimulation, too much information, too many thoughts, too many ideas, this kind of thing, then try to do your best to organize those thoughts, right? The other sign that Mercury rules is Virgo. So Virgo kind of gets down to the nitty gritty and does the research and likes to keep things sort of neat and tidy and organized. And also look at the big picture, which is Sagittarius, the sign opposite Gemini. Use that as the balance point, right? Instead of getting sort of caught up in the minutia and the details and the sort of, smaller kind of day to day. That's important. It's a good time to focus on that. But if you're getting overwhelmed by that, try to take a step back, focus on the bigger picture. Kind of do that here and there over the course of these next few weeks, and that can help. I'm going to show you the chart real quick now before I go into talking about where Gemini is in your particular chart and where this, energy is really concentrated over the next while for each of you. So here's the chart, and this is for today. And so here we've got, I was just speaking about Mercury and the Sun. So there's Mercury, 1 degree away now from the Sun in the air sign of Gemini, right? Gemini is a mutable air sign, at home in the 3rd house. I always use the natural zodiac when I do these because I find it's better for kind of grasping the information and for learning. So what else do we have? Okay, so here is the moon. I mentioned earlier on in the video, the moon, right, conjuncting the south node, and will pass over the eclipse point, will pass over Saturn and Pluto. So we've got that going on today. And, well, there's Neptune, right? Neptune and Pisces, squaring Jupiter up there still. We've got that influence. It's a long, drawn out influence going on. There's Chiron, right, in Aries, which I was mentioning to you, which is squaring Mars in Cancer down here at the early degrees of Cancer. So those are the things I will point out. Of course, we still have Uranus and Taurus and Venus there as well. Venus will then move into Gemini, and there will be more Gemini energy going on. So on that note, let's talk about where Gemini is in your chart, right? And this is the area that will be lit up for you over the next few weeks, month kind of thing. So I mentioned Gemini is a mutable air sign. The symbol of Gemini is the twins. And the key words or the key phrase for Gemini is I think. It makes sense. Gemini is very intellectual and associated with, thinking and information and that kind of thing. Physically, Gemini rules the upper body. So the arms, the lungs, the hands, the nervous system, the shoulders. And if you think about that, the airway, it's all those things we kind of use to communicate, speak, we need our breath, our hands and arms we gesture with, sometimes our shoulders even, or we feel that the tension from too much mental stimulation going on in our shoulders. Gemini can kind of flit about, and that's that connection with the nervous system, right? So like the wind that sort of changes direction several times a day, that's kind of the energy of Gemini as an air sign. And some key kind of words to describe Gemini energy would be flexible, would be impressionable, sociable, curious, intellectual, mental stimulation, mental activity, exchange of information. So taking in and giving out of information, right? Sharing. And perhaps restless. Sometimes there's no kind of clear path or clear goal because Gemini is so curious all over the place, gathering information, right? Talking to this person, talking to that person, text messages, on social media, just gathering all the information, reading, 10 books all at once on the go, this kind of thing. That's Gemini energy. And so there can be a bit of lack of direction, of a solid kind of path, right? And in general, Gemini kind of favors quantity over quality when we're talking about information. It's curious. It wants to know all the things, right? And talk to all the people. So on the shadow side, like I mentioned, it can be a bit restless, a bit kind of lacking direction, somewhat detached, emotionally detached as an air sign, perhaps ungrounded sometimes as well. And so we're going to now go through each rising sign, right? Remember, I always say to you that in these general forecasts, the rising sign is the most accurate because I know, or any astrologer, right, can tell that if you are, a Pisces rising, for example, Gemini's in your fourth house. For Pisces risings, but I don't know if you're a Pisces sun. I don't know what house your sun is in necessarily. I don't until I look at your own chart based on your birth details. So that's why a personal reading is always much more detailed, in-depth, accurate, those kinds of things than these general forecasts, right? But so first and foremost, listen to your rising sign, then your sun sign and your moon sign. The moon sign speaks to the emotional experience of these things. And so with that, we will start with Gemini, because Gemini, obviously, it's your season and this is all happening in your first house for Gemini rising. And so I mentioned to you, if you do have your sun sign in Gemini at like the first degree kind of thing, then your solar return chart has that Kazemi position that I mentioned, right? Mercury at the heart of the sun. And that will influence the year in general. So that energy will be there for you over the course of the year. But in general, over these next few weeks, month kind of thing, there can be a lot of thinking about the self, right? The first house, the self, about your physical body, about your body image, about your appearance, the way you present yourself, the way you come across, your vitality even. So maybe there may be some decisions to be made regarding these things, or some information to collect or share regarding these things. There might be even something social going on regarding these things. So like a lot of we're thinking about your vitality, your physical body, or appearance. It could be like going to the gym a lot and talking to a lot of people, a lot of activity around there. That's just one example. So, but that's generally the area that is being lit up for you at this time under this Gemini, influence. That's where the Gemini energy is for you. Gemini. So moving on to Taurus. Taurus, you've got Gemini in your second house. So that's where all this is happening for you. So a lot of mental activity, communication, socialization, information gathering, sharing of information, perhaps decision making regarding money, resources, values, self-worth. These are all second house things. Maybe thinking a lot about how you make your money even, right? How you sort of sustain yourself in the world. Or maybe lots of conversations going on with other people regarding personal values in some arena, some group setting, or just in general, conversations about that, or gathering information, reading about it, that kind of thing as well. And so that's for you. That's the area that's being lit up for you, Taurus, in terms of the Gemini energy. And just, always make sure you go and you listen to the intro, because that gives you the overall picture. And then when you listen to your individual little blurb, you have context and it makes more sense when you do that. Because I don't have time in these videos or really energy to go to do every single sign, the intro, and then so just do an overall, and then you can listen to that and then listen to whatever sign. Okay, moving on to Aries. Aries, we are looking at the third house for you. So Gemini energy is concentrated on that third house, which is the natural home of Gemini, actually. So this kind of amps up the focus on all things Gemini related, right? Mercury related. Communications, interactions with siblings, cousins, peers, perhaps, lots of kind of conversations, information, sharing, talking, writing, curiosity, mental activity going on in terms of even like an early learning setting, elementary school. It's like your early education, the third house. That's one of the things, right? Plus, as I mentioned, communications in general, peers, your immediate environment, and short commutes as well. So it could be, maybe you've got a lot of short commutes going on over Gemini season for whatever reason. You've maybe working on a writing project that's really active, seeing a lot of action, mental activity going on, lots of communications, perhaps some socialization going on with, like an extra dose of that with peers, with cousins and siblings and that sort of thing. So that's what's going on for you, Aries. And I'm moving on to Pisces now. Pisces, this Gemini energy is lighting up your fourth house. So the house of home and family and our roots and our place of living and our sense of emotional security and our, it reflects kind of the mother literally the mother or mother figure, that nurturing sort of quality. And so for you, Pisces, there is lots of activity centered around the home, particularly, mental activity, communication, speaking, talking, reading, writing, sharing information, and socializing potentially as well, right? Thinking about home, family, your roots, your emotional security. And it could be like there's a lot of, maybe you're doing in the planning phase of doing some kind of home renovation. So there's a lot of talking back and forth going on with contractors or, with your partner about, what's going to happen. And there's a lot of just gathering information about that. Potentially, home renovation or real estate venture or something like that. It could be just a lot of socializing in your home or with family members. Or you may be just thinking a lot about your emotional health, your emotional security over this time. So that's for you, Pisces. And I'm going to move on to Aquarius now. And Aquarius rising, this is happening in your 5th house. So that's where Gemini sits in the chart for you. And so, pardon me, lots of mental activity going on and communication and socialization and, information gathering and decision making regarding children, whether they be your children or somebody else's children that you work with or are involved with in some way, with your creative projects, your creative self-expression, with pleasure-seeking activities, right? What sparks joy for you, how you have fun. So maybe you're just having a lot of communication about children with a partner or with anybody, with teachers, with co-workers, that kind of thing. Maybe there are a lot of parties going on involving children that children are included in, kids' birthday parties, that kind of thing. Or there could be just a lot of communication happening, a lot of thinking and curiosity and mental stimulation around some kind of creative project for you. So this can also have to do with your inner child, the 5th house. And so it may be a lot of thinking, talking about those things related to that. Or just, how you have fun, planning on having fun, a lot of talking about, what you're going to do and the socializing you're going to do and the dates you're going to go on and, outings and, concerts and whatever it is that you like to do. It can be a lot of communication around those things. All right, moving on to Capricorn. Capricorn, this is happening in your 6th house. So lots of mental activity, decision making, information gathering, information sharing, potentially socializing, messages going back and forth regarding your health and wellness or somebody's health and wellness that's in your immediate sphere. Or just health and wellness in general, right? Some people work in the health and wellness field, and this can be seen through the 6th house, those daily kind of job tasks and that sort of thing. This can also reflect, it's about your daily routine. So just those routines on the day-to-day, the daily grind, whether those be at a job or at home, it matters not. Those are, it's covered under the 6th house here. Also, this has to do with how we serve others, how we are in service. It has to do with those interactions between like superiors and subordinates. I don't like those two words actually, but it does reflect this house, the 6th house, right? Where, at one time it was like seen as, master and servant in ancient astrology in some schools. So that's that kind of unequal relationship is reflected in the 6th house here. And even small pets, actually the 6th house governs small pets. So there could be, with all of these things, there could be lots of healthcare appointments maybe, that you're traveling to, here and there in town, and having a lot of conversations with healthcare providers potentially, a lot of meetings or training that potentially is involving employees and employers, or students and teachers even. This could be information gathering and planning about your daily schedules and routines. Maybe, summer's coming here in the Northern Hemisphere, and maybe there's a lot of conversation going on about what's going to happen on the day to day, like maybe with the kids even, or just, how you're going to spend your time, that kind of thing. So that's for you and Capricorn. And we're going to move on to Sagittarius now. So Sagittarius, Gemini sits in the 7th house for you. And so this revolves around your close relationships, those one-to-one relationships. So there can be lots of talk about relationships, or with those people, lots of communication with those people that you are in one-to-one relationships with, whether they be, your marriage partner, or your, best friend, or your business partner, or somebody you kind of have a contractual agreement with, or just in one-to-one relationship. And this can even be a rival if it sits in this house. So, this can be going on. Maybe there's, excuse me, decisions to be made in terms of relationships, or within these types of relationships. Or maybe there's a lot of socializing going on during this time with your partner. So, you're going to lots of parties together, or a lot of socializing going on with a business partner potentially, or a lot of talks going on with a business partner potentially. So that's for you, Sagittarius. And I'm going to move on to Scorpio now. Scorpio, this Gemini energy is focused on your 8th house. So there's a lot of mental activity, information gathering and sharing, and decision making and curiosity, and perhaps messages, regarding your shared resources. So it's like money and resources that you share somehow with another. It has to do with your intimate connections, your vulnerability, right? The places where you're kind of vulnerable. It has to do with that cycle of transformation, right? The cycle of death and rebirth, not necessarily literally, but transformation. Has to do with the hidden psyche. So those things that are kind of stuffed down in there, that we don't always look at. So this could be some sort of practical things. It could be is, you renegotiating loans, for example, or working on a better way to do your taxes, or it could be communications, back and forth regarding an inheritance. So maybe there has to be some back and forth about that, or scholarships, or some kind of shared income, whether it be business income or a partner's income even. So there can be a lot of communication around these kinds of things. It could be conversations and information gathering, mental stimulation that has to do on some level with occult subjects. So all occult means, right, is hidden knowledge. So, you may be doing a lot of reading and researching and taking classes and gathering or sharing information about some kind of, occult subject. So that's a possibility. There could also be some back and forth going on that revolves around power and control dynamics in some way as well, because that's an 8th house theme. So that is for you, Scorpio. And we're going to move on to Libra, where Gemini is sitting in your 9th house, Libra. And so this Gemini energy is concentrated in the area of your chart that has to do with travel, teaching, learning, your worldview, your philosophy and belief system, your search for the truth, bigger picture ideas and concepts. Can have to do with publishing, writing, getting your message out there kind of thing. So maybe you're planning a trip, let's say. That's one example. And there's a lot of activity and communications going on regarding that. Maybe traveling, maybe you're just traveling a lot during this time, and that travel has a social element to it. So you could be like going on group tours, or your travel is centered around learning something, some kind of educational travel, um, or information gathering travel. Or maybe you're taking a class and soaking up all the information and all the ideas, and learning something new over this Gemini season. So that's for you, Libra. And moving on to Virgo now. Virgo, we've got Gemini in your 10th house, right? So this energy is centered around your public reputation, your status, your career, your, like, not your day-to-day job so much, job tasks, your career, right? The bigger kind of picture. Your ambitions, your achievements, and your relationship to authority and authority figures. And your kind of relationship to your own authority, I would say, as well. So there may be a lot of thinking, say, about your career or communication, about your career or careers. Maybe you're trying to decide on a career or a career change. Maybe you're in talks about a promotion, a potential promotion, and there's a lot of communication going back and forth. Maybe gathering and sharing information with people that are authorities, somehow, authorities in your field, perhaps. Or maybe you're seen as the authority and you're being asked for your input and asked to share information. Or maybe it could be that you're just doing a lot of socializing that's career related, right? A lot of networking, that kind of thing could be happening. Or a lot of back and forth going on that has to do with your public reputation. Hopefully not that you're needing to defend it or anything like that. Just a lot of mental activity going on about that. So moving on to Leo, and Leo, this is happening in your 11th house. So this is where the Gemini energy is concentrated for you. Mercury in there, and then eventually Venus as well. And so there can be a lot of socializing and communication, and just general curiosity, maybe making decisions that have to do with friends, right? Friendship groups, or associations, clubs, anything like that. Also, perhaps about your vision for the future, your hopes and dreams and wishes for the future. Can be a focus for you during this time. There can be a lot of thinking going on about that, or gathering information, a lot of talking about it. It could be, maybe you're going to lots of parties with your friends, or just connecting with friends a lot of gatherings, just general communications with friends. Maybe you're involved in a club, or other group that there's just a lot to think about or a lot to talk about at this time, a lot to learn, even if it's something new. It could be that you are gathering some information and doing a lot of thinking about what you want moving forward, what you want for your future, your hopes and dreams. So that's for you, Leo. And last but not least, we've got Cancer. And so Cancer, this Gemini energy is concentrated in the 12th house for you. And that's the area of your chart that has to do with the hidden things, right? It's kind of like what happens behind closed doors, in a sense. Our spiritual world, how we spend time in solitude, resting, recuperating, relaxing, those kinds of things, how we recharge. It has to do with the things that are buried in our subconscious, and the ways in which we sabotage ourselves falls here as well. And it's related to institutions that are sort of contained or closed off from the outside world. So you've heard me mention before things like hospitals, retreat centers, prisons, rehab facilities, treatment facilities, these kinds of things. Long-term care facilities. So it may be that you're thinking a lot about some of these things. Subconscious messages might come through your dreams, even with this 12th house, energy going on. Or it could mean, you're going to go on a little retreat with a whole pile of books. You got some fiction, some nonfiction, got a bunch of books, and that's how you're going to spend your R&R, right? Is this mental stimulation in solitude. Or it could be there's a lot of interactions going on with one of those kind of institutions that I previously mentioned that's governed by the 12th house. So there could be a lot of back and forth, a lot of communication and messages being exchanged, or information gathering, that kind of thing, with regards to one of those facilities. So that is all 12 signs, and that is where, for each of you, this Gemini influence will be happening. That's the area of your chart that will be lit up by this Gemini Mercury influence over the next little bit. And so I hope you found that helpful. And keep in mind what I said, about this Chiron, Mars and Chiron squaring off. Be mindful of that. And I hope you come back next week. And I think next week, I haven't looked ahead too much, but I think we'll be talking about the next new moon. All right, so take good care, and I will hopefully see you next week. Bye-bye.